Columbia. Her name is Vera Elwood, and I want to hear everything that she wants to tell us about.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Like he said, my name is Vera Elwood. I will give you a heads up from the beginning. So, between competing myself and then teaching both at the high school and college level, I've been involved in competitive public speaking, speech debate, and mock trial for about 15 years of my life. So, I have two modes. I either speak very briefly or I talk for 2 hours and you have a hard time shutting me up. So I'm going to lean towards the very briefly and hopefully have time for as many questions as you would like to ask me. I'm certain you don't just want to sit here and hear me give my presentation for a full hour. So my name's Vera Elwood, and I am running for the City of Columbia City Council Ward 2 seat. I am so thrilled to be running for office in a city that I absolutely love. I've lived in Columbia for about a decade. I have that classic story of I came here for undergrad. I came here for school as a third generation Mizzou Tiger. My grandfather came to Mizzou on his GI Bill after World War II, and we have all followed in his footsteps ever since. And I got to carry on that legacy. And from the moment I got to campus, I absolutely fell in love with Columbia and decided I wanted to stay. I had the slightly different version of that experience where I, in my undergrad years, actually spent more time off campus than I did on campus because I quickly found that it wasn't just Mizzou that I loved, it was Columbia itself. I became deeply involved in my community through public service, through local organizations, and through political organizations in my undergraduate years as well. And I knew that this was where I wanted to live, this was where I wanted to raise a family, and this was where I wanted to make a difference. So after college, I briefly moved away to enemy Jayhawk territory in Kansas for 3 years and spent those whole 3 years trying to figure out how to get back to Columbia. And eventually we did. And once we were back to Columbia, we knew it was time to start a family here because this is truly the Columbia that this is the area that we love. This is the town that we love and where we want to devote our time and our service. My whole career has been devoted to public service. I became a librarian by trade. I spent about a decade working in public libraries at public universities, serving the public through their information and access needs. More recently, I made the transition to nonprofits, and I work at the Center Project here in Columbia, running their youth programming and serving our local youth in the area. But it's not just my career that's devoted to public service. I also devote my efforts outside of work to truly serving my community. I volunteer with 5, 6, 7 organizations in town. I've been deeply involved in political campaigns, particularly issue campaigns. I was on the ground gathering signatures at the very, very start of both Proposition A and Amendment 3 and will continue to fight both of those battles in the coming years. And I have served Columbia through formal public service on boards and commissions. So I have about 2 years serving on the Disabilities Commission and most recently stepped into chair when Jackie Sample won her city council race. And then I've also served for about 9 months on the Commission on Cultural Affairs. So my love and my service and my experience in Columbia run deep. When this position was first filled, when the Ward 2 seat was first filled by Lisa Meyer back in 2024, I knew that in 3 years' time, I was hoping to run for the spot. I had watched the race, I had watched the candidates, and I had sat in the background thinking, I believe I could make a difference to my community by running for this seat. Then the surprise came when that position opened up 2 years earlier than I expected. And I had to take a moment and figure out if the time of life was right for me. And all of the dominoes fell into place perfectly. In fact, just last month, we formalized and completed the adoption of our former foster child, now legal child. And just a few days later, the position was announced as open. And I thought, okay, I can replace all of those meetings about foster care with meetings about the city, and it will work out perfectly. So the timing just lined up. I believe that with my experience and my knowledge of Columbia, I can run and truly create a Columbia that is for all. That's the core of my campaign. I believe that Columbia is a place where everyone can and should feel safe, feel welcome, and feel truly at home. So with that platform, I see that through three particular steps. The first is a foundation for all. This is where we're looking at issues of fully staffing our city departments. We have incredible people here in Columbia who are trying to do great work and are working with incredibly short-staffed crews and are not able to meet the capacities and goals of their departments. So making sure that we have city departments that are fully staffed. Revitalizing our public infrastructure, particularly in Ward 2, public infrastructure is a incredibly important issue. When you look at public transit, it barely reaches out into Ward 2. It kind of barely scrapes the bottom of Ward 2. We have one bus line that runs through us, and the vast majority of our ward is not able to easily access public transit that would allow them to get out into the rest of the community. When you look at recent outages in our utilities and our power, you see that those are largely hitting Ward 2 specifically. We are seeing a lot of the infrastructure issues affect our ward more intensely than they might be affecting other wards. And we know that our people, our neighbors, are feeling that disparity. We've also seen some incredible improvements in this area. I was really excited at the last Commission on Cultural Affairs meeting to see the rollout of two new utility box wraps. The first utility box wraps, those are, if you aren't familiar, where you see the big, clunky, typically ugly utility boxes wrapped with art from local artists in our community. And the two most recent ones were actually debuted in Ward 2. It's the first time that project has expanded into our ward. And I was incredibly excited to see that move forward. We have another public art project coming to Ward 2 very soon that's actually going to be right down the road from my house. And part of that public art is going to include the installation of 40 new natural trees along a pedestrian pedway that I know my son is going to be biking up and down every day. So these infrastructure issues really affect me and my family and my neighbors. The second piece of our platform is safety for all. So this is where we're looking at public safety, specifically with that lens on disability and accessibility, making sure that our community is safe and accessible for everyone in it, people of all abilities, people of all ages, people of all modes of transport. Also looking at Safe Streets, Vision Zero, the Complete Streets project, all of which are going towards a goal of achieving zero traffic deaths. Again, this is something that Columbia is making incredible headway on. This year, we have significantly fewer traffic deaths, both vehicle, pedestrian, and cyclist deaths. We have significantly fewer than we did at this time in 2024, but we have not hit zero yet. And with the correct infrastructure, with the correct policies, I believe that our community is capable of achieving that. And the final piece of my platform is opportunity for all. This is where it is deeply important to make sure that we are advocating for all of our neighbors. This has been my favorite part of the campaign so far. My favorite part is walking down the streets, knocking on doors, and talking to all of my neighbors, finding out what they care about, what they're worried about, what their fears are of Columbia, what their hopes are for Columbia, and learning what they need from me and what they would need from someone in the city council seat, learning what they are passionate about. Also, an opportunity for all, I'm looking at prioritizing local, keeping Columbia's money in Columbia. So making sure that we are prioritizing local workers and local businesses, preventing outsourcing, looking at expanding the reach of prevailing wage and offering that on more projects to make sure that we are not having city projects staffed by people who do not work in Columbia, and that if we do, we are paying them the same wages that we would pay a Columbia worker, and we're not bringing people in from another state, paying them below our standards for our own neighbors, for our own citizens and our own laborers, and undercutting the value of our local labor. Um, Along with my public service, I have also spent 2 years as a community organizer through Laborers Local 955, LIUNA, the city workers union that also serves the University of Missouri. So I care deeply about labor issues, and I see the vast majority of these issues as labor issues. One thing that you will often hear from me on the campaign is that every issue, and particularly infrastructure and safe and public safety, comes down to labor. The city can buy all of the asphalt that it wants, but if we do not have people who know how to lay that asphalt, are paid well enough to take the job in the first place, and are treated well enough to stay in that job, share their knowledge, and grow in their knowledge, the potholes are never going to get filled. And that is true of every labor position, of every infrastructure issue in the city. So I believe that with a foundation for all, a safety for all, and opportunity for all, we can achieve a Columbia for all. And that's why I'm running for city council. I hit right about at the 15-minute mark, which was my goal. So now I'll open up the rest of the 15 minutes for questions.
Are you able to see the chat, and are you able to see if people have questions, or would you like some help from me?
I can see the chat. I have not seen any questions come through.
And I don't see anyone with their hand up. I think they were a little surprised that you did it in the time.
I was trying to watch my clock pretty closely. So um,
I'll
it,
get you started. Like people are thinking, one in recent city elections, the issue of public safety has been much discussed, and for many different angles. So I think it's fair to ask you, as a candidate, how you assess the safety status in Columbia and the needs that we have.
I think that's a great question. When it comes to assessing status and needs, it will not surprise you, knowing that I'm a librarian, that I'm always seeking to gather more information. So I'm going to want to meet with people, to hear from people directly, and that includes all angles of it. I want to consider public safety. I want to hear from the law enforcement officers. I want to hear from the police union. I want to hear from the firefighters and the firefighters union. I also want to hear from the public. I know that we have had a lot of reports done. I'm expecting to see a lot more data, particularly now that we have our Office of Violence Prevention. I know that one of the goals of that office is to start putting out more regular reports about the state of public safety in Columbia. So on the assessing piece, it would be actively seeking out that information, actively asking for those meetings. I apologize. I know there was kind of a second half of that question, and I've forgotten what it was.
No. No, status and how you see about going about. I think that's good enough for now. There are more questions now. I believe Pam was first at the gate there.
Okay, you spoke briefly about pedestrian deaths. Where was a pedestrian death in your ward?
That's a great question. So the pedestrian death information that I know is through the Disabilities Commission. We get information from the Public Transit Committee. We get information from our what used to be called our Vision Zero Committee and is now called our Safe Streets Committee, I believe. Um, So I don't have the exact locations. I know that just a couple of months ago we received a report of the number of deaths for the whole city, and that it was significantly lower than it had been the previous years.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. Next up, our invaluable Vice President for Programming, Kathy Jensen.
Hi, Vera. I wanted to ask if you could talk about infrastructure a little more. I feel like I'm not really understanding uh, the concerns in the second ward are regarding infrastructure.
Yeah. So with infrastructure, that is looking at, I mean, that can be a very broad term. What I'm looking at specifically would be streets, sidewalks, utilities, public transit, those pieces of infrastructure. So in Ward 2, public transit, we only receive one of the bus routes. I believe it's the Orange Line. It is the Orange Line that comes through Ward 2. And it only goes into the kind of southernmost tip of Ward 2, and the more northern parts of Ward 2 do not have bus routes at all available. So with that piece, people are having to either travel to the bus route, which for many people makes bus travel entirely inaccessible, or they're simply not able to use the public transit at all from their home. Um, with utilities, I was specifically referring to in the last few months, we've had a few utilities outages, some caused by storms, some caused by there was a failure at a plant. Those outages both hit Ward 2 harder than they did any other ward. We had, I think it was over 3,000 houses without power each time, and the vast majority of those 3,000 were specifically in Ward 2.
Okay, I'm going to go to the chat and take the first question there from Peter Schneeberger, who asks, do you think it is ever appropriate for law enforcement agents to do their jobs with their faces covered and their badges obscured? I guess there's some concerns. I'm not sure if that's from Colombia or from other places that comes from, but have you any thoughts about that?
I absolutely do. I have been a public employee for the vast majority of my career. And as a public employee, that means my name is public, my decisions are public, my pay is public. Everything that I have done, everything that I have said in a library board meeting was all open and available for anyone to see. I believe that our law enforcement officers should be held to that same standard. If a librarian needs to have their name, their email address, their pay, public information, a law enforcement officer needs to have that same standard. I will say, with that faces covered aspect, as someone who serves on the Disabilities Commission, as someone who has many chronic illnesses, and there are many times where I have needed to wear a mask in public settings for my own safety and for the safety of others, so I'm not getting people sick. I have very occasionally seen that used to try to prevent law enforcement officers from being able to mask for health reasons in public settings. I think that everyone should be able to wear a mask at their job. I do believe that their badges need to be visible, badge number, name, and they need to be identifiable, even if they are wearing protective measures.
I'll continue with one on chat from Bree Mink. She says, regarding Vision Zero, what specific strategies or actions do you think the city could take to achieve a Vision Zero goal of zero traffic deaths and create a more walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly city? Asking for just a little more detail there.
Thank you so much for that question, Bri. This is something that I am incredibly passionate about. I was able to attend two of the Complete Streets open houses that we had between city staff and the consultants that they brought in from CMT to work on this updated project. The last time we created our Complete Streets plan was 2004. 21 years ago, and it has some deep need to be updated. I think that in order to see a vision zero, in order to see zero traffic deaths, there are three things that mainly need to be changed. The first is policies. Policies about what street development looks like, what sidewalk development looks like, what we can do to create those actual physically safe roads, passageways, distances between the street and pedestrian transit. The second piece of that is the physical infrastructure. Once the policies are written, once we know what a safe sidewalk, what safe transit looks like, we need to actually have those in place. So some examples of what this can be. One would be a protected bikeway. Right now, the majority of the bikeways in Columbia are just a line of yellow paint on the road, and a lot of people don't actually know whether or not their car is allowed to go in there, whether or not they can park there, whether that is protected. If we offered more physical protection, whether that was a cement curb, whether that was a small greenway, a grassway, or whether those were just the pylon barriers that you can create, having something that physically drivers can see and that will physically prevent drivers from crossing into the bike lane will create a much more bikeable city. Another thing that we see is the further that you can distance the sidewalk from the road, so the more grass or cement that you can put in between the cars and the pedestrians, the less fatal accidents you will have. Now, that grassway isn't necessarily going to prevent a car from driving off the road, but even one additional foot of grass between a car and a pedestrian can turn it from an accident where that pedestrian passes away or dies into an accident where that pedestrian maybe needs to have a bone reset, but is walking away from the accident. And that can make a huge, huge difference.
Thank you for those details. I think you could go a lot further on them, but we have a lot of questions.
I appreciate that. Yes.
So I will go next to the question of Simone McCandless of CoMo. She asks, you mentioned that your campaign is based on facilitating a more welcoming community. What does creating that kind of community look like? Again, asking for a few more details.
I think that creating a more welcoming community is a little bit of everything that I have talked about. When we have when we have sidewalks that are more walkable, streets that are more safe, people feel more welcome walking through their neighborhoods, walking downtown, walking to local businesses. When we have people in city council who are willing to listen to their neighbors, to take those concerns seriously, they feel more welcome and more involved in local government. When we have policies that are prioritizing our people, policies that are prioritizing local labor, that are prioritizing safety in all aspects, that are prioritizing people first, then they're going to feel more welcome. And I think a huge part of that is just in city council being willing to hear people, to take them seriously, and to ensure that when they say, this is an issue that matters to me, this is an issue I want you to pay attention and take seriously, you actually follow through on that. And I think we're seeing an incredible version of that with the conversations happening about federal funding and DEI, and how seriously City Council is taking listening to community feedback, ensuring that they are hearing that feedback, listening to what Columbia needs, and not just making a decision on their own in a vacuum.
Great. Now I'll call on Herb Tillema to ask his own question.
In contrast to the preceding, I'll ask a very general question, anathema debater. How satisfied are you with the new master plan? Or are there areas within it that you'd like to see the city go further than it has committed?
Can you clarify with the master plan? So there was recently the Boone County master plan. Are you talking about the city strategic plan? we've got a lot of plans in the works right now.
I said it was general.
Very
All
general.
of the plans.
Okay.
All of the plans.
Yeah, in general.
Okay. I would say that in general, I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm trying to think about the variety of plans that we have in front of us. I was just diving into the Boone County Master Plan earlier today, and looking at some of the updates in that. Again, that librarian piece in me, I always love seeing the new data. I always love seeing the new statistics and the new information coming out. I find some of those statistics fascinating, seeing the growth in our area, particularly in the last few years, as mentioned in the Boone County Master Plan. I think for the city strategic plan, we are at a very interesting moment. And I briefly hit on that in my last answer. Our city strategic plan focuses strongly on DEI because we knew that was something that Columbia cares deeply about. We knew that was something that makes our city a better, safer, and more welcoming place. And right now, because that is in our strategic plan, we are at risk of losing funding. I think it is always, always, always important that we are, like I said, prioritizing the people and making sure that even if there is language that has to come out for the sake of funding, we are finding other things that we can put in to make sure our people are protected. I think that if we are simply going into that strategic plan and Control F to search and Control Delete to get rid of, we are losing the core of what our community is actually asking for from the city. And so instead, we need to find those things that are putting us at risk and see if there are alternate ways we can address those problems. We can speak to those issues without using the language that is contentious at this moment.
Okay, Olivia Hayes, your question.
Hi, I'm Olivia with ABC 17 News. Um,
Excellent.
yes, yeah. I was wondering what your thoughts are. You're endorsed by two former council members, one of them who previously held the seat for a very long period of time. So it seems that, he was really liked by his constituents to be continuously reelected. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? And is there anything from their times while holding that seat that you plan to take as maybe inspiration or even build upon?
Absolutely. Were I to step into this position, I would be standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before me. And I am deeply honored that two of those people have endorsed me and said that they believe I am the correct choice to continue their legacy. So I've been endorsed by Mike Trapp, who was in the seat for many, many years, and Andrea Weiner, who is on this call, and who, along with her endorsement, I actually served as treasurer on her campaign for candidacy for the seat. So clearly, I believe strongly in the positions that she held, in the work that she did. I've had the opportunity to talk to both of them very extensively throughout this campaign to learn about what they saw in their time in City Council, what they saw as the main issues in Ward 2. I am constantly impressed by the dedication that they showed to Columbia, by the dedication that they showed to their neighbors in Ward 2, not only while serving in the seats, but both of them continue to be deeply involved in and compassionate for the issues of Ward 2. I am truly, truly honored to accept the endorsements of two people who, what I keep hearing, both from people who have spoken to me personally, from comments on the news articles online, from things I've just heard around the community are that Mike Trapp and Andrea Weiner were two city councilors that you could always talk to. They were people you could always reach out to, who would always have a listening ear, and who were very effective at not only hearing what your problem was, but then going back and researching potential solutions for it, gathering more information for you, and escalating that solution to the next step and following through with actual action, not just plain lip service. So I would be honored to continue their legacy of having those open conversations and having actual action follow those conversations.
I think I'm going to have to call time because we really, there are two excellent questions in the chat. I'll just point out for everyone to consider. But right now, I want to thank you, Vera, for introducing those of us who've been a bit outside the loop to you and to your candidacy today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the time and for
And
the
that,
wonderful questions.
yes. And now, the second candidate that we're honored to have with us today. Oh, I want to mention that both of these candidates have been to Muleskinners meetings before. I didn't know who Vera was, and I was so exhausted I didn't introduce myself when she showed up at one of our meetings, but I did have a few words with our next candidate. Ken Rice will talk to us for 15 or 20 minutes about himself and his campaign, and we'll go on with more questions after that.
Thank you, David. I appreciate the warm introduction. And as you mentioned, I've been on a Muleskinners call before, and my intent is, as much as I can every other week, to join your group as well as other groups to get a diversity of opinion. Because in a nonpartisan race, I think it's important for us to all get everyone's opinion so we can understand what the true want of our community is. With that said, a little bit about myself. First of all, I'm beyond excited to have the opportunity to run in this election to perhaps serve the people of Ward 2. When me and my wife moved here about 3.5 years ago, we didn't really know. We came here for a job, and at first we took a look at around the St. Louis area, and we were like, oh, it's a big city. There's a lot going on there, a lot to do, but it's a big city. And my boss, who began Pickleman's, the sandwich shop in town here in 2005 on Old 63, said, hey, I have a house in Columbia. How would you like to take a look at it? So I came to Columbia. My wife and I drove around Columbia. We were like, man, what a nice little town. And it was. It had everything we were looking for. It had the small town feel with enough amenities that it was a big town. So and then we knew that if we wanted to go to a bigger town, you have St. Louis a couple hours away, Kansas City. And then we had the colleges, which is always a great diversity there. So I just really fell in love with it. My wife and I, we both like the outdoors. You'll find me playing pickleball at Albert Oakland a lot of times. That's one of my. Just recently, I picked up pickleball either there or at the Arc. So of course, Albert Oakland being a big part of Ward 2. And before then, or after, a lot of times you'll catch me on the Bear Creek Trail. I throw on a 50-pound rucksack and I do a 3 to 5 mile hike during the trail. And I mean, it is just, it's beautiful. We have some of the most beautiful parks, the most beautiful, outdoors parts that you could ever have. It's just, and the diversity of the town. When I just left being running for school board, it allowed me to see a diversity of the town that I had never seen before because I got to get in front of a lot of different people. And that made me fall more in love with our town to say, hey, wow, what a great town and what a giving town that we have, and how proud I am to be a citizen here. And when it came to the time of hey, when I was asked by Lisa called me right before she decided to resign, or right before she resigned, and said, "Would you consider running for the Ward 2 seat?" And I said, I would be very proud to be able to do that. One, I feel that even though it was a short time, Lisa provided a leadership that was across the board. Everyone I talked to on any side of the issue, and that's staff, that's people from, again, it's nonpartisan, but everyone, left, right, whatever. People said Lisa was a good person. She listened, she cared. And, I felt like, I could do the same thing. I could follow in her footsteps as somebody who's I'm not looking at partisan things. I never look at who's telling me. I want to hear what they have to say. And if it makes sense, and this is my businessman in me, if it makes sense and it's logical, let's do it. And if it talks about people, let's do it. So a little bit, more about me as a person. I was the only adopted child of a dedicated homemaker and a proud 30-year AFL-CIO union guy who worked for Pan American Airlines. So I stood, when people say, "Hey, do you understand labor?" Well, yeah, I understand labor because we were on wage funds for a while and, struggling to make ends meet because it's tough. And I remember asking my dad, why are we doing this? And he said, son, when you have something you believe in, you got to stand up for and do the right thing, no matter what. And that stuck with me. People say, "Hey, why you lost in the school board election?" Well, my dad also told me you don't quit. You keep going at it. So, and so I didn't come away feeling like it was a failure. I came away that, hey, I learned something and I got better. It was my first time. I'm not a politician. I can't say that I have the speaking. I haven't been in debate society like Vera has. I'm just a guy who's been in business for a number of years and reached a certain level at each of them. In school, back when I was there, I was always seen as a troublemaker because I was getting in fights. I kicked the principal in the shin one time and got in a lot of trouble. And what I found out later on, after getting sent to the principal's office and then to a bunch of psychologists, that I had ADHD. And really, people didn't know about that back then. It was just like you're the troublemaker. You're in. So I was quite the problematic child growing up. I went to high school and I graduated from New York, and then I went to St. Petersburg. At the time, it was junior college. I was this is a conflict of interest for you journalists out there. I was the editor of the school newspaper and the vice president of student government. So you want to talk about a conflict of interest there? I covered myself doing such a great job on student government. So so it was an interesting way to have. And at that point, I was. I had some love of wanting to join the Army. So I joined the Army before I graduated. I ended up becoming a forward observer with the 25th Infantry Division out of Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. Got to travel a lot of the world then, and I got to travel a lot of the world with my dad as part of Pan American Airlines. Um, just got out, and right about 3 months after I got out, starting to go back to Florida State University, I was called up, and I was part of a unit that said, "Hey, you're going to end up going to Germany." So we went to Germany, or we were going to go to Germany, and then we were at the last minute said, "Nope, you're going to go to Saudi Arabia." So I ended up in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, and stayed at a tent city for about 3 months. And then we were moved outwards towards Dhahran. While I was there, I was part of it was a male unit actually. And so I thought, oh, okay, this isn't going to be too bad. The first time we had a a drill where we had to put on chemical gear. The first sergeant had a nervous breakdown, and the chemical, the NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical non-commissioned officer, stood there with a deer like in the headlights. And I said, "Are you going to do anything?" He says, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "Okay, stay there." I went and helped the first sergeant get all his gear on, got his mop suit on. Then I went and helped the guy who was the NBC NCO get together, helped everyone else, and then the next day they relieved the first sergeant and the NBC NCO. They brought a first sergeant in from the 20 from the what was it? It wasn't 25th Infantry Division. It was from the 1st Ranger Unit. And then he promoted me to the NBC NCO, Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical. And I had to learn quickly what it was that if we had chemical weapons, what to do and how to decontaminate people. So it was sort of a quick learn about stress. It's also colored my life being that in that type of way. When you're talking about life or death and you've got to make decisions, everything else afterwards becomes okay. It's important, but this is not life or death decisions. So it clarifies my leadership. After getting out of the military, I went into work as for restaurants for my career. I started working with a number of restaurants. I was everything from the sandwich maker to the dishwasher to everything else. And I rose at one point to be an owner and operator of a Wendy's and Tim Hortons franchise for over 15 years in Michigan, in Southeast Michigan. During that time, we took it and we became one of the top franchises of that. In fact, we won one of the proudest. We won the Jim Neer Award, which means that our people, we had the least turnover and the best employee engagement out of the 6,000 restaurants that Wendy's had. We also had the #2 Wendy's restaurant in the whole world at that point, right before I left. So had a lot of success there. During that time, I also served on the board of Spoiling for Children, which is an adoption place where we help kids that are struggling to get adopted to get adopted. During that time, we hosted 5 years of where we had adopted kids come into our restaurants, meet adoptive parents. And at that point, what we were able to do is through our things, had 11 kids directly adopted. And these are the kids that were physically abused. These are kids that are older. These are kids that were minorities. These are kids that aren't the easy ones that have, anger issues. I also, during that time, mentored a young man named Charles from 13, and he's now 25, and we have weekly calls together to help him through that. I want to, I've been married to my wife for almost 17 years. She'll get mad at me because it's not quite 17. It'll be July 11th. It'll be 17 years. We have a blended family of 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, including one that I adopted. And I'm adopted, of course, myself. Moved to Columbia, like I said, just about 3 years ago. My family is incredibly diverse, and we've grown closer through our shared challenges. I have my personal struggles with ADHD. My wife has multiple sclerosis. My mother, who has lived with us for the last 4 or 5 years now, has severe dementia, which led my wife to leave her career in information technology to become her full-time caregiver. Our son Brandon, who has high functioning autism, or that's what it's called now. It was called Asperger's when he was diagnosed, and he's now a successful assistant general manager at our downtown's Pickleman's restaurant, and he's a tremendous source of pride in our family. My daughter, who is there too, is a social worker. My other daughter is a nurse. And then one of my daughters, who happens to be on our call today, Laura, she was my stepdaughter, but she's always been my daughter. She's a successful lawyer and happens to be a lesbian with her girlfriend that lives in Indiana. So we have a very diverse family. We have a very loving family. So it's made us stronger through that. And then these are the diverse experience that help me and will help lead me to make good decisions to be a good rep for the for Ward 2. And I'm going to quickly go through my platform, but I won't take a lot of time because I'm trying to be cognizant to give at least 10 minutes to some questions here. But it's hard to talk about many years of living in a short period of time. So please forgive me if I'm a little bit wordy. When it comes to my platform, number one, when I looked and said, hey, we have a number of well, first of all, let me tell you, we have so many good things. We have many good things happening here in Columbia. We have a loving town. We have beautiful parks. We have a lot of positive going. But one of our biggest opportunity is a lack of action on very important issues. And a couple of those issues that I think we all have to agree, infrastructure, we have power lines that back in 2013 we realized we had a problem. 2015 we got funding for it to fix those power lines and get them going. 2016 we paused it, and we're still on a pause 9 years later. That's unacceptable. We can't not take action on things because it would take one tornado like the one that just knocked off the recycling plant. How about if that would have hit some of our main power lines? Well, yes, we want to talk about what infrastructure and war. Well, that's going to knock out power lines all the way across, and it's going to take a long time to get us back up the power grid. We have to fix those. We have a capacity issue that in 1 year, we need to sign more contracts to get capacity going. There's no word on how that's going to happen. Vera touched on it, but I'll touch on it again. I'd like to ask everyone here, who rode the city bus in the last month? Well, I did 2 days ago. I took it all the way around. And guess what I found out? I sat there, and the buses, some people say, hey, the buses are, they're not being staffed. Well, there's a lot of people on the bus. But here's what I found out, because I talked to a lot of people on the bus, including the bus drivers, a guy named Kevin, who's a dispatcher, a guy named Big Al, who is a bus driver and helps clean up. And all of them told me, all 2/3 of the people that are on that bus are what non-destination riders. What's a non-destination rider? They're homeless. The other thing is, even on the bus, a lady I talked to, she was a nice lady. She had 2 kids and we were playing. And I said, do you ride the bus a lot? She goes, I try. It's really hard. It takes 90 minutes. Me and my son sat in the heat waiting 90 minutes because we had just missed the bus. So we had to wait 90 minutes. And I'm thinking, if I have a job, how could I possibly do this? Here's the other problem. The buses stop at 6:40. So, I better hope my job gets off on time. And Vera said it, and I'll agree. It doesn't reach into Ward 2. Ward 2 has some of the most needy people for having a good bus route. So this infrastructure thing, and here's the problem with this. I was talking back in 2016, we had 16 buses. We decided in 2019 to go down to 6. And now we have 6 routes with 3 buses. How can that work? How can we say we're taking care? We talk about equity. How is that equitable? Because the ones who need it the most aren't getting it. And then there's the fire and police staffing, which I'll talk to a little bit more on. But those staffing problems didn't just occur yesterday overnight. Those staffing occurred over the last decade or more by not planning correctly and not acting on the knowledge that we had. The people's voice, that's number 2 of my platform. I am committed to being accessible. I've already started. I had a town hall the other day and invited people from Ward 2 to come and speak whatever about their issues. I want to be able to meet the people where they're at, wherever that may be. So the town hall is a place that I'll go different places and allow people to come to. I had it was virtual, so they could do that. I enjoy walking the neighborhoods. I want, talking to the people and asking them, what are your concerns? What are your needs? Because number one thing that I believe that I have to do is listen, listen, and listen. And then I have to take that information and go and try my best to help solve the problems. And I'll use an example. I'm not even elected yet. One of the issues that was happening is Park DeVille. Park DeVille has a dumpster that had that they needed to have some dumpsters that were accessible to them. Well, no one could give an answer, including Lisa when she was at her thing. Well, after 5 people, I finally got an answer. Park DeVille, and I went to the residents and let them know that the answer had been voted on by their HOA and is being solved, and now they have an answer. Yes, they don't get it for free. They're going to have a small assessment put there, but it is solved, and now we know what was going on. But after it took me talking to 5 different public officials to get that answer. But that's the intentionality that I'll have. I found out about it 2 weeks prior. And I spent just talking to, calling and making calls and calling and finding out what the answers are. Safety and well-being. I don't want to, we have a beautiful town. And I don't want to make it sound like the Wild West. I think that's a disservice to our town. What we do have is some problems, and we do have a true feeling that sometimes it's not safe, whether it be on the bus, whether it be in our parks, where it could be. And we have to solve that. And we have to have people feeling good about what's going on. And then the biggest thing, here's a couple of comments I had. I don't feel safe when I went to walk the Bear Creek Trail, especially at night. This is a lady that when I was walking with my 50-pound rucksack, I'm like, hey, how's it going? How do you feel? And she goes, I wouldn't come here after 5 o'clock at night ever. And and she says, I just don't feel safe. And part of that is we're allowed for 4 park rangers. We have 1. Police. And then a lady on the bus also said, I'm worried about the one with the kids. I'm worried about the amount of homeless that are on the buses because they yell, they're scary. I'm intimidated by them. Whether that's true or not, her perception is reality. That's, that could keep people from being on the bus. So we have to understand that. And then last but not least, I'll just quickly go through. I've got a lot of data, but our police chief says that we need 51 more officers to be at where we're supposed to be. Our fire chief says we need 48 more firemen to have the four firemen that we should have for every thing, or for every truck. I'm sorry, and then we have to. Lastly, we have to prioritize these emergency services, and inside of that, we have to prioritize the people inside those services. So thank you. I'm sorry I went quite a bit, but I had, there's quite a bit to say. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken, for that really wide-ranging and interesting presentation. I'm going to do what I can with the questions that are in the chat right now. And apologies to everybody if I don't quite get it and mess it up.
And I can stay till 5 after.
All right. Okay. I'll
give a
shoot
little
for
bit,
5 after.
to give a little bit. I do have to leave, but I don't want to just like cut like, hey, I don't have any. I can't answer anything.
I'll shoot for 5 after and get you to your next thing. First, I want to note that someone named Laura in the chat said hi, Dad. So I want us all to say hi back.
That is my daughter,
Laura.
Here.
And now I have a question from Alice Turner. She actually is referring to your campaign for school board, and she wanted more clarification on your statement that you were in support of some of the policies of President Trump. Right now, I think in some cities, people are concerned about the current federal administrations beginning to affect the cities. So do you want to clarify what you meant when you said that, or if you want to talk about policies that you support or don't support, just as examples?
So, here's my thing. I'm running for a city council seat, and I'm looking at local issues. So that question came up, yes, during a NAACP question. Do you support all that Donald Trump says? I said, and it was it was told yes or no. And, thank you for allowing me to clarify because the question is not at all a question that gives clarity around anything, in my opinion. That let me rephrase, if I may, what I would say if I would have had time to think about the question. I would have not answered yes or no because you can't answer yes or no because there's no way I agree with everything anyone does. So at the end of the day, there's some policies that maybe I'm going to like and some I'm not going to like. And overall, I'm mostly concentrated on the things that affect, that I have an ability to affect as a city council person going into this race, and specifically Ward 2.
You don't want to give specific examples then, right now.
Well, I'm here. My specific example is that I'm here to support the local policies for Ward 2. I'm not here to get into national policy because I have no control over it.
All right, fair enough. I want to try to combine what Bry and Marie have asked, and it has, Marie puts it in this way: what are your suggestions on how to address problems like public safety and how to fund improvements? And Bry asked if you would support Proposition A, which was passed, that raises minimum wage to $15 by 2026, and otherwise how to promote and incentivize businesses. So it's basically they're both going to how do we solve our financial problems to get to the goals that we want to make.
And I'm glad that question came up. Throughout my career, I've gone into situations where we've had needs in my businesses. I've owned businesses, I've oversaw businesses, multi-million-dollar nonprofits. And there's been times that funding is good, and then there's been times that fundings are problematic. Well, the first thing you have to do is prioritize what needs to be taken care of. So when he talks about, or they talk about public safety or community safety, we have to prioritize those things, number one. Then we need to say, how much do we need to fund these projects? And then we need to look at the budget, which is a quite lengthy piece of paper, and go through and with a fine-tooth comb. So here's something that I would look at differently. When I've had to do this before, which I have in my businesses, I don't go through and say, hey, everybody, I need a 3% cut. I need to take so that's taking a sledgehammer when you need a scalpel. You need to look at every line item. You need to look at every expense. And then you need to prioritize those things that are most important. Then you have to say, hey, where can we cut while we're prioritizing safety and people? Safety and people. And we need to go find those money. And then if we don't have that money that's out there in the budget, then we have to say, okay, how can we get more revenue? Well, revenue comes to us, through fees, through fines, or through taxes. So we have to decide, okay, one, how can we save ourselves? And if we can't save ourselves to pay for it, then we have to say, we're not going to fine them. My goodness, I hope we don't want to be Mayberry where, we're saying, hey, let's try to pull more people over to collect more money. So we can't do that. So that leaves fees and taxes. And, a reasonable thing we may have to look at is, possibly a public safety tax over time, because the people of this town understand that we need to fund these essential services, and we may have to pay for that.
A real follow-up from Andrea Wayner. Have you looked at the city's budget, and what would you propose cutting? How do you discern what the city's priorities are?
So, Andrea, I appreciate that. The city's budget is I wish I would have brought it downstairs. I printed it all off, and I've been wading my way through it. So I can't say that I have a direct answer to that right now. But believe me, as this campaign goes on, I will have some areas that I think could be done. But here's more importantly, Andrea, I don't necessarily know that I'm the one that's going to do that. I think that's why we have a city manager that we hire and we hold accountable, and it's his job to figure that out and give us a good solutions. And he has a team of people that he has to do, and we hold him accountable to doing that. And here's the other truth. We need to set objectives for him. And if at the end of the day he's not meeting those objectives, we need to give him a little bit of a chance to fix it, or we find somebody else that can do it.
Okay. And another question from one of our experienced local pros. Deborah Finley asks, what will be your response as a city council member, I'm assuming, when ICE comes to our community and begins to sweep up people who are not violent criminals, people who are mothers, fathers, or even US-born citizens?
Well, my first thing is, and I actually addressed this during the school board thing, is if we know that that's coming, let's try to get the good, non-violent people that may be problematic. Let's get them legalized as best as possible. It's just like anything else. There are laws that we have to follow, so we need to try to follow the laws, the way they're written.
Oh, that's a
Dave,
succinct answer.
Dave, this is Deborah. I'd like to go a little bit further on that.
Okay.
You cannot legalize people overnight. It
Well, I
takes
understand
years.
that, Deborah.
It takes years to become legal citizens. So that your response will not help these people that are being swept up.
So if it means that we're going to break the law to to have that, I would not break the law. One of the things I do believe in is that, whether we agree or disagree with laws, that we follow the law.
We have just enough time for another question. If I may, I'd like to use Justine's question for the other candidate, and she wanted to know what you would do. What is your vision for supporting the business community here in Columbia?
Well, I think supporting the business community is exactly what I had talked about in my platform is making sure that we have a good infrastructure, making sure the business community feels good that they're in a safe environment where people are able to make sure that our infrastructure is set up, that our fire and police things are set up, that when it comes to staffing, the bus, if we had a better bus system, they may be able to get better staffing across the board has been an issue for people. Well, if we can help get them transportation to work, well then there's more people that they can staff their businesses with. And then we always need to prioritize and listen again, that the people's voice. I want to know what their issues are, particularly in their particular neighborhood, in their particular street. What are their challenges, so we can try to work to fix those problems.
I have to call time because you must get on to your next thing.
Thank you very much. And there'll be plenty of time for me to speak a lot more, but thank everyone for the graciousness of your invite today.
My heart is warm that both candidates can discuss adoption and disability at great length and with great experience, and many other things as well. But those two areas have really impressed me today. And so thank you, Vera and Ken. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, Vera.